Welcome aboard the Silver Marlin. Could you please listen to the following safety announcement? In unlikely events of emergency, you request follow all instructions from crew on board. This vessel equipped with fishing buoyant apparatus for all passengers and crew. The vessel may rock due to passing vessels or weather conditions, so please take care to your seats. Children should be supervised at all times and never held above the height of the handrails. And finally, smokers are not permitted whilst on board. Thank you for listening.
Welcome to Loch Lomond, known as the Queen of Scottish Lochs. It's the largest expanse of fresh water in Great Britain. 23 miles long, 5 miles wide, and at its deepest point at the northern end, the loch is 636 feet deep, making it the third deepest in Scotland. The River Leven, which we are now leaving, is the loch's only outlet, running from here into the River Clyde in Dumbarton, and from there into the Atlantic Ocean. The area is home to an abundance of wildlife, and its history is as rich as the landscape that surrounds these mysterious waters. It's a place where kings have trod and outlaws roamed. It has inspired writers, musicians and artists for generations. It was during the Victorian era that Loch Lomond became famous across the world, thanks in large part to the romantic novels of the likes of Tobias Smollett and Sir Walter Scott. Day trippers would travel here by train from Glasgow to cruise aboard large paddle steamers like the one we're passing on the left. This is the Maid of the Loch, the very last paddle steamer to be built in Britain. She was built in 1953 on the River Clyde in Glasgow and brought to Loch Lomond by train in sections before being assembled on the loch side. She represents those bygone days where she and many ships like her would sail the length of the loch filled with visitors. These ships also provided a valuable mail and transportation service to the local communities. As with many coal and steam-powered vehicles, mounting maintenance and running costs saw the ship retired in 1981. She now stands as a monument to both Glasgow's shipbuilding and Loch Lomond's steam-powered past. Of Glasgow and the River Clyde as both the world's premier shipbuilding city and as a major shipping port between Europe and the Americas. This saw a boom in wealth to the area in the 1800s. The trade routes, which saw Glasgow flourish, traded textiles from Europe to the Caribbean, sugar and molasses to America, and tobacco back to Glasgow. At one time, 50% of all the tobacco in Europe had arrived via Glasgow. The wealthiest of these Glasgow tobacco lords were able to live the lavish lifestyles of aristocrats, building European-style villas in Glasgow and the surrounding area. Whilst the billionaires of today buy super yachts, their equivalent in the 1800s built grand country mansions for hunting and fishing, for which the land around Loch Lomond became prime real estate. During this cruise, we'll pass just a few of these houses built by these super-rich tobacco barons, shipbuilders, and merchant bankers. Cameron House was built in 18th century by the Smollett family, a family of shipbuilders and merchants, whose most famous member was the poet and novelist Tobias Smollett. Such was the wealth and influence of the Smollets. The house has welcomed a few famous guests in its time. Former Prime Ministers Winston Churchill and Anthony Eden, as well as Empress Eugenie of France. As was the case with many ancestral homes across Britain, The costs of upkeep, staff and servants became unsustainable for the family. It was sold in 1986, and after extensive additions to the original building, Cameron House was converted into a luxury 5-star hotel and resort. The large house on the hill that you may be able to spot between the trees on the left is Auchendennan House. Auchendennan House was commissioned in 1860 by the Glasgow-based tobacco merchant George Martin and was designed by famous Scottish architect John Burnet. During the Second World War, the house was used as a convalescing home for American servicemen coming from the front. After the war, as a goodwill gesture, the house was converted into a youth hostel, thanks to a generous donation from American trade unions. The house remained a youth hostel until 2012. Today it is owned by Loch Lomond Distillery, who use it as a base for their offices. The house also marks the site of the hunting lodge of King Robert the Bruce, who owned much of the land and islands on Loch Lomond. These he used as his private hunting estate, introducing much of the deer and game birds to the islands and surrounding area. This is the widest part of Loch Lomond, at a distance of 5 miles. As we look ahead, you may be able to notice a line can be drawn between the hills on each shore and the islands between them. This is the Highland Boundary Fault Line, which cuts across Scotland, separating the Highlands from the Lowlands. It's a geological fault created when the islands that form Scotland crashed together 500 million years ago. It runs from Stonehaven, Aberdeenshire in the east, to the Isle of Arran in the west. The difference can also be seen in the surrounding landscape as the rolling hills and meadows of the lowlands behind us make way to the rugged peaks of the Highlands ahead. As we cross this boundary, we'll enter into the Scottish Highlands. This fact earns Loch Lomond the title, the gateway to the Highlands. Before the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s, the meeting of these two contrasting landscapes was reflected in the meeting of two contrasting cultures. The hardier, more traditional Highland clans, and the increasingly genteel lowlanders. This melting pot situation often led to disagreements and conflict. Not far from here, behind the hills to Loch Lomond's southwestern bank on our left, lies Glen Fruin, or the Glen of Sorrow. Glen Fruin is the site of one of the most gruesome battles in Scotland's history. In 1603, a dispute between two rival clans, Cahoon and MacGregor, culminated in the two meeting for a pitched battle in the glen. Despite being outnumbered 2-1, the hardier and more battle-experienced MacGregors managed to flank the Cahoon forces, and what began as a battle became a massacre. The story goes that for the 200 casualties the Cahoons suffered, the MacGregors lost only 2. To further demonstrate the contrasting cultures between Highland and Lowland life, the battle was observed by local students and scholars who, according to local legend, were also put to the sword. Due to the mercilessness of the MacGregors, King James VI had their clan chiefs executed and decreed that the MacGregor name was to be abolished by pain of death, a judgment that would not be lifted until 1775, 172 years later. Because Scotland and the British Isles were formed 500 million years ago, it may surprise you to know that Loch Lomond only dates back 12,000 years to the end of the last ice age. At that time, Scotland was covered in glacial ice, up to a mile deep in places. As this ice melted away over centuries, it gouged deep canyons into the land, forming the many famous lochs of Scotland. In its early years, Loch Lomond was connected to the sea before the land at its southern end rose up, trapping the water, which is now replenished by the burns and rivers of the surrounding hills and mountains. The loch's catchment area for rainfall is 270 square kilometres, and its water level can fluctuate by as much as 3 metres between seasons. The shoreline of Loch Lomond's southwestern bank, to the left, is home to 2 world-famous championship golf courses. The first is the Carrick, opened in 2006 and designed by the famed Canadian golf course architect, Doug Carrick. The second, and most famous, is the Loch Lomond Golf Course, designed by the American golfer Tom Weiskopf, and is revered by golfers the world over. Described by Tom Weiskopf as his lasting memorial to golf, the 7,100-yard Parkland course hosted the Barclays Scottish Open for many years, as well as the Solheim Cup, and ranks among the best courses in the world. The club itself is among the world's most exclusive, and its invite-only membership list boasts names from all over the world. The course record of 61 is held by the South African golfer Sweeney Cruises. Gaelic word for mountain, and Lomond from the Brittonic word lumian, meaning beacon. It's thought a single beacon would be lit at the top of the mountain by the Brittonic tribes who populated this area between the 5th and 10th centuries. There are 6 other mountains in the world named Ben Lomond: in Canada, the United States, New Zealand, Tasmania and Australia, all of them named after the one you see here today by Scottish settlers to remind themselves of home. Between the trees on the bank of Inchmurrin Island, you may be able to spot the ruined remains of Lennox Castle. This castle was built by Duncan, the 8th Earl of Lennox, in 1393 to escape the plague which was ravishing the mainland at the time. The great earldom of Lennox lasted for 400 years, between the 11th and 15th century. It was made up of what is now known as Dumbartonshire, as well as parts of Stirlingshire and Argyll and Bute. At its heart lay Loch Lomond, which the Lennox clan chose as their base. All who lived in the area did so under the rule and protection of the Earl. This included 2 of the most famous names in Scottish history. During the Scottish Wars of Independence, both William Wallace and Robert the Bruce were separately given permission by Malcolm V, Earl of Lennox, to use Loch Lomond site as a bolt hole and hiding place during this violent period in Scotland's history. William Wallace's presence in the area is evidenced in Wallace's Isle at the north end of Loch Lomond, where legend has it he once took refuge. Robert the Bruce relied heavily upon the Lennox family and their forces during his campaign to become King of Scotland. He commended the men of Lennox for their bravery during the Battle of Bannockburn, where he finally took the throne in 1314. In his later years as king, it's known he and the Earl hunted together in the surrounding countryside and islands. Much later in its existence, Lennox Castle was home to Mary Queen of Scots before her capture and execution on the orders of her half-sister, Queen Elizabeth I of England. It became a favourite hunting destination of her son, King James VI of Scotland, who would later also ascend the throne of England to become King James I of Great Britain. Yes, for those of you who don't know, it was the Scottish king who took the throne of England to unite the crowns. Is a clan. The clan system was a way of structuring ancient Scottish society. At the head of each clan would be a clan chief, who would usually be the owner of the land in the clan's territories, and the chief would be answerable directly to the king. Contrary to common belief, not all members of the clan are part of one family, although most would take the surname of the clan they belonged to. Most of the clan members were tenants of the land and would pay a rent or fee to their chief. And in return they lived under the chief's protection, but could be called upon to arms to settle land disputes or disagreements. The clan system lasted from around 1000 AD until the end of the last Jacobite uprising in 1746, when Bonnie Prince Charlie was defeated in the Battle of Culloden. In the aftermath of this battle, the clan system was abolished, and the wearing of tartan outlawed. It wasn't until the great Sir Walter Scott found the Scottish crown jewels in 1818 that there was a resurgence in Scottish culture. Scott, who was a lawyer, novelist and historian, had been charged with locating the lost honours of Scotland by George IV, which were found hidden in a chest in Edinburgh Castle. Their unveiling to the public was a historic PR event, engineered by Scott. Attendees were encouraged to come in Highland attire. Even King George attended head-to-toe in Scottish garb. It was only thanks to Sir Walter Scott's command that these aspects of Scottish national identity and culture were revived. Today, if you have a Scottish surname and still have a recognised clan chief, you can consider yourself part of that clan. No application process necessary. Early economy for the Loch Lomond area was the secret distilling and smuggling of whisky, which, during the 1600s, was heavily taxed by the Scottish government. Loch Lomond's islands became the perfect locations to set up illicit whisky stills, out of sight of government excise men. The remains of many of these stills can still be found on some of the islands today, with intricate networks of rails and makeshift canals transporting whisky on boats for smuggling to the mainland. According to local legend, when excise men were searching the area, men from the surrounding villages would take to their boats singing loudly as they rowed to alert the smugglers. No doubt the favour would be repaid with a few bottles of whisky. Today, Loch Lomond's whisky-making tradition is upheld by the completely legal and legitimate Loch Lomond distillery from nearby Vale, makers of Loch Lomond and Inchmurren whiskies. Fans of Tintin outfits may be interested. These were the favourite whiskies of Captain Haddock. Whilst the early inhabitants of the area were more concerned with making a living through farming and fishing, much of Loch Lomond's history is connected with its use for recreational activities. Many of the islands and surrounding landscape was historically used for hunting by the noble class of Scotland. Much of the wildlife of the islands was introduced for the purpose of hunting. Recreational fishing has also been a popular pastime over the centuries. In 2013, the Loch Lomond Angling Association introduced a catch and release policy, which has seen not only the number of fish increase, but also an increase in the numbers of nesting birds of prey. There are many famous walks and trails around the local area. One of the most famous being West Highland Way, which starts in nearby Bulgaria, stretches past Loch Lomond and Cornhill and Balmaha, and all the way to Loch Lomond. In more recent times, recreational activities on Loch Lomond have become dominated by water sports. The local rowing club is among the oldest in the world, having been founded in 1827, but also more recently, open water swimming and paddleboarding have become increasingly popular pastimes of locals and visitors alike. miles. The Viking flotilla entered Scotland from the west coast and was able to sail to neighbouring Loch Lomond, where a breakaway fleet led by King Magnus of Man were commanded to drag their longboats 1.5 miles overland to Loch Lomond. With the Lennox forces leaving to join with the rest of the Scottish army, Loch Lomond's side had been left defenceless. The Vikings undertook a 3-day reign of terror, burning and pillaging their way through the undefended monasteries, crofts and villages lining the loch's shores and islands. The breakaway fleet exited Loch Lomond via the River Leven and reassembled with the main Norwegian army in Dumbarton. They were eventually defeated by the forces of King Alexander III at what is now known as the Battle of Largs. It was to be the last ever Viking expedition to the British Isles, forever leaving the Western Isles of Scotland under Scottish control.
Thank you, mate. Take care of
Cheers.
yourself.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Cheers. What?
Say hi to the driver.
Right. Sounds.
That's us, eh? Look at the uniform.
Did you shoot?